November 0, November Yankee Yankee. For anybody that doesn't know me already, my name is Bart, Bravo Alpha Romeo Tango. It's 11:45 and we are going to begin getting ready to kick off the Holler Happy New Year net in memory of our dear friend K0OJ, who used to do this on the 115 and maybe some other repeaters too, I don't recall, but this will be a directed net. All traffic will go through net control. Let me rephrase that. The preliminary traffic between now and midnight will go through net control in 0 NYY. At 11:55, that is 5 minutes till the hour, I will call for repeater silence. With one exception, we will have everybody off of the repeater. Please do not key in that last 5 minutes. And the one exception will be a cameo audio of OJ. And, the plan for the net this evening, there will not be check-ins. There will not be check-ins. That is unusual. Let's make that clear. At the last minute before the hour, that is 11:59, I will key up. I will rebroadcast the audio from WWV, and when beep occurs, I will announce Happy New Year and my call. The next thing that will happen is Bill, K6VPE, will key up, announce Happy New Year, and his call. I am doing this because Bill has been closer to OJ than anybody for the last couple years, and to me it just felt like the right thing to do. When K6VPE unkeys, let the madness begin. First come, first serve, best signal goes through first. If you possibly can, please have a second radio turned down so it doesn't echo, but so that you can hear if you got through. If you did not get through and somebody covered you, try again. Try again. Try again until you do get through. It will be a cacophony. It will be lots of people stacking up. That's just the way it is, and that's one of the reasons why we loved it, because that's how OJ did it, and that's how I'm going to do it. Break. Because this is New Year's Eve, traffic and mobiles are at risk. If an emergency occurs during this time period, my recommendation is switch to the 447.700, the 145.115, or the 147.000 in Greeley to handle your emergencies. I have been told by at least 2 different people that they would be monitoring the 700 and the 115. I'm going to presume somebody can monitor the 147, but the caution is during the time that this net is going on and all these people are announcing and hollering that emergency communications will not be possible on this repeater for that time. So the odds are not 0, but they're pretty small, so that's the backup plan. 447.700, 145.115, 147.000 if you have emergency traffic that you would normally handle on this repeater during this net. Once again, this is N0 NYY. My name is Bart, and I will be net control for the K0OJ Memorial Holler Happy New Year net. Once again, at 5 till, I have 10 till right now, but at 5 till, I'm going to ask for repeater silence. Until 5 till, carry on. N0 NYY.
K0MLG, stand by. Holler Happy New Year net 2020. from KD0GM. Happy New Year, N0MEP. Shadow. Happy New Year, K0POD. Happy New Year from N0WAR and Noel, formerly known as K0QF, in the workshop. Thanks, OJ. Glad to be here 2020. Happy New Year from KD0GM.
Reset.
Any more out there? I'm recording. Happy New Year. This is KD0GM. Okay, Happy New Year again. That is Zero. That's yes.
Hope everybody enjoyed that from the 2020 Holler Happy New Year net. K0MLG clear.
Marty, what repeater was that on?
This repeater.
Okay, interesting. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. The audio was a little rough, but it was pretty good copy anyway. All right. Again, thanks, Marty. Appreciate that. And N0NYY, we have, we're down to our repeater silence. I will come back up just before 1 minute prior. N0NYY.
N0NYY, KC0FND.
KC0FND, N0NYY, you're in. Go ahead.
I was just asking, I'm on my handheld here in the living room. Thanks. I'll catch you later. KC0FND.
Roger, roger. Okay, I'll make the announcement once again. I will start up at within the last minute before the hour, or just before the last minute. And I will key through the WWV beep. I will ID. Bill, T6VPE, will come up next for his announcement. And then everybody dive in as best you can. Again, have a radio handy so you can hear whether you got in or not. If you did not, just keep trying till you do. N0NYY. This is N0NYY, net control for the 2022 in memory of K0OJ Holler Happy New Year net. In 2 more minutes, I will key up with WWV. Let's keep the repeater quiet until then. N0NYY. There's 11:58. We are standing by in requested repeater silence for 1 more minute, and then we will start the official timing of the Holler Happy New Year net. And this is N0NYY. This is N0NYY, rebroadcasting WWV for the 2022 Holler Happy New Year net. Seconds. Happy New Year, N0NYY with N0QXQ. Bill, you have the floor.
KOX. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, W0 KJM.
Here. Happy New Year, K6ET.
SNKB0YVJ.
Happy New Year, KD0GN.
Happy New Year, W0BNC. Rest in peace, OJ.
Happy New Year, K0IBZ.
Happy New Year, W1BA, Mike Zulu Victor.
My OJ. Happy New Year, N7MR.
Happy New Year, and 7VDR, rest in peace, my friend OJ. 2023 is not going to be the same without you.
Happy New Year, KD0GN.
Happy New Year, K08ZA. Happy New Year, AE3TV.
Happy New Year, WD0HDR.
Happy New Year, K0ART.
Huge. This is Coquak. Happy New Year, everybody. From K0MLG and my fiance.
Happy New Year from KD0GN.
Happy New Year from W1VAN, as OJ used to call me, Wyden.
Happy New Year, AE07.
Happy New Year, KG0EXB.
Happy New Year, Kilo Delta Zero, Mike Zulu Victor. OJ, we're going to miss you out there.
Happy New Year from November 6th, Sierra Victor Bravo. Happy New Year from Whiskey 2, Mike, India, Charlie, known to Cooge as a no-code extra.
Anybody else? This is M0NYY Net Control for the 2022 Holler Happy New Year Net in memory of OJ. All right, we'll go back to semi-directed for the moment. Does anyone have any memories they'd like to share?
N7MR.
N7MR, go ahead.
I moved into Fort Collins in September of late 93, I believe it was. Got my radio set up, and OJ was the very first person I talked to as a newbie in town, N7MR.
I came in, the K6EB.
Go ahead, Bill.
I came in, Mike, it's really funny you'd say that, Mike, because I came in and I think it was 97 or 8, and OJ was the first person that I talked to on the radio.
In the last week and a half, M0NYY Net Control for the Holler Happy New Year Net in memory of OJ. In the last week or two, I've heard maybe 24 people say, he was the first person I talked to on the radio. Or, I listened to the scanner. I listened to 115. OJ was on there every day, sometimes 24 hours. I have heard so many of those. The man was an icon in ham radio. I got my license in 91, but I knew OJ since about 85, nearest I can reckon. He was very good friends with Andy, who was my Elmer, and got me into ham radio. And, but what history there is in that. And M0NYY, who else would like to share a memory?
W1VAN.
Go ahead.
I know a lot of people didn't like the way he nicknamed people from their call signs, like KS4DUS. I don't know his present call sign, but I know that he didn't like the way his nickname, but I do, and that's the way he remembered people, and I think it was pretty cool the way he nicknamed people.
MLC.
Go ahead.
I didn't know until Bill told me. He did this on the air, so it's no secret, but OJ had Asperger's. So that explains a lot. Like tonight, you heard That's what he called me. My old call sign is KC0QOK. And OJ tested me. And a good friend of mine, KC0QOL. So I was quite off kilter, and Tim was quite often lost. And we were both truck drivers, still are. And Tim very seldom got lost. That's how it was. But I was go clock, and I just want to say that it explains a lot with his Asperger's on how he associated quirky little names for people. I always enjoyed it. Some people didn't, but and by the way, Ivan, KF4DUS passed away a couple months ago, just to let you know. I didn't know if you knew that. So anyhow, that's a little bit of a memory right there. Go Cooj.
011 at control for the Holler. Happy New Year. Net in memory of OJ. I know that OJ had a very intellectual sense of humor, and oftentimes his humor went unrecognized. His favorite form of humor went unrecognized for 10 or 15 minutes, and then when the person to whom he directed the joke finally figured it out, he got that grin on his face. And he wasn't real big on smiling a whole lot, but when it took somebody 15 minutes to figure out the joke that OJ had told on them, that made his day. He loved that. His sense of humor was a little peculiar, a little dry, sometimes even mildly offensive. But I believe that those were all just defense mechanisms for it that he used. Underneath the crustiness, the curmudgeonly bachelor, who always said when asked how he was, rotten as ever, was the answer. But all of that was, I think, defense, to keep an otherwise very warm-hearted and kind person protected from people's perception of his handicaps. I love that guy. He was awesome. He pissed me off bad a few times, but it lasted 10 minutes. We talked about it and got over it. That was more or less my fault anyway for getting mad, because it was just his sense of humor. He was just like that. And I know some people didn't care for him because of it, and that's okay. But he's gone now, and we're all going to miss him, and we're going to be talking about him for another 50 years easily, him zero in my life. Who else would like to share a memory tonight?
10-7 VDR. I have one that involves both of the recent psionic keys. Over.
I think it was N7 VR. I missed the call, but go right ahead, sir.
Yeah, it's Jimmy here, November 7, Victor Delta Romeo. So anyway, I had known Cooch for several years before this event had taken place. Didn't really know Mike, KF4DUS, or Cohortus, as he was affectionately referred to. But anyway, I rolled up to a Walmart one day on Mason and College. Got out of my car and I'm walking up to the door and I roll past this truck that looked like a porcupine. I'm like, dang, that is the coolest thing I think I've seen in quite some time. So I blew it off and I walked into the store and I'm shopping. Next thing you know, I hear Cooch on radio and I'm like, dude, I know that guy. So I found where the sound was coming from the next tile over, and it was Mike. And I walked up to him. I'd never had met him before until this point. And I said, hey, dude, I know that guy. That's K0OJ. And he goes, yeah, here, you want to talk to him? He handed me his radio. And this was on DMR, too. This is actually what brought me over to the digital stuff. So I said hi to OJ, and then shortly after that, I got me some DMR radios. And, yeah, I thought that was a very mind-blowing story because it involved both of them, but it was pretty cool. Anyway, thanks for letting me share that with everybody, and 7 VDR.
N7VDR and 0NY. Thank you for sharing that. Yep. To get the two of those old guys together, that was in the same event. That's just cool. But they were both on the radio a lot, a very lot. Again, so many times I've heard OJ was the first person, the most person, the guy that tested me, the guy that answered all my questions. Just literally a foundational person in ham radio, not only in northern Colorado, but I think all around the country. Just the influence that guy had was incredible. I remember doing field day up on Joe Mountain. Some guy up in Massachusetts, I could hardly understand a word this guy said. His accent was so thick. And I was on the mic, CQ field day, K0 old junk, and he said, "Is OJ there?" And I said, "Yeah, he's sitting right over here." And the guy hollered at him, and OJ grabbed the mic and said hi back, and this guy in Massachusetts had known OJ some 20-odd years. And it was just, you can't go to, there were very few places you could go where somebody hadn't heard of OJ. It's just amazing. And 0NYY, who else has a memory to share this evening?
I have another one, N7MR.
N7MR, go.
Back in the day when I was more involved with the club, I think I might have been president at the time, I don't remember, the 115 was the more popular repeater, and the 447-275 was up there and working, but not used as much, hadn't gained popularity yet. At one point, the 447 went down, and it took us a while we went up there and checked it out, and it took us a while to get the repair stuff, whatever it was we needed, a new repeater, a new controller, I don't remember what it was, unkey. When we finally got the stuff, Rick, W0RCI, and myself went up on the mountain and took out the old repeater and put in the new repeater, and when we powered it up and the 447 identified itself, W0UPS/R, as it finished, OJ keyed up and started in the middle of a conversation to whomever it was that he was talking to, and the other guy responded. It was as if a month and a half ago, when the repeater went down, they simply paused their conversation, and when the repeater came back up, they just continued their conversation right where they left off. N7MR.
Makes you wonder if he didn't have some kind of supernatural ham radio powers. It wouldn't surprise me at all. 0NYY net control for the K0OJ Memorial Holler Happy New Year net. Who's next? I'll share another one. That guy had a memory like an elephant, and I thought that from way early on when I first met him, that I didn't know anybody that could remember stuff like OJ could. My second HF radio, I got my no-code tech in 91, and then I got my code shortly thereafter. And so I got an HF, and I had my first radio was a Radio Shack 10-meter. My second radio was an FT101EE. And OJ told me that's a really good radio, but you're going to want an extra set of tubes for it. So I took it apart, opened it up, pulled the tube, got the number, or looked at the schematic, I don't remember, got the number, wrote it down, put it in my pocket. OJ says, "Come on over, I probably have some tubes for you." At that point in time, 91, 92, 93, something like that, OJ had, I believe it was 3 little metal sheds out in his backyard full of tubes, most of them new in the box. We get over there, and he says, "What was the radio?" And I reached in my pocket, and he says, "No. What was the radio?" I said, "It's FT101EE. He says, "You need 6 LQ6. You need 3 of them." I pulled the paper out and looked at it. Sure enough, he was right. Why was I surprised? I didn't know at that point what a memory he had, and he's looking around with his glasses, and sometimes put his face 3 inches away from what he was trying to read, and found it, and he looked at a row, and he moved down the row and looked, and he moved down the row and looked, and pulled 3 of those tubes off the shelf. I said, "What can I give you for them?" He said, "How about $5 a piece?" So I paid him. And I took them home and I put them in a box next to the radio, and I got online and I looked them up, and those tubes are going for about $55 or $60 a piece. He was just that kind of guy. If he was radio, he would do anything. If it was radio, he would do anything he could to support you and move you on your way, especially if you were new. N0NYY, who's next?
Well, I wonder if anybody on the air tonight has ever been to OJ's gaseous ice cream birthday party. I never made it to one, but he used, I can't think. It's a gas. He used it to freeze the ice cream. Has anybody out there ever been to one of OJ's birthday parties? The homemade ice cream frozen with, God, I should know this, what gas it was that freezes it. That was one of his annual things, and he was quite proud of that.
I never saw the gas. I would suspect CO2 would be the best to use for that. It's affordable, and it makes a tremendous refrigerant. And you can just squirt it through a little pointy tube, and it'll freeze stuff pretty solid. Made homemade ice cream with him lots of times. You had to crank a little bit if you were going to get a bowl, but when I did it, it was salt ice. And he had to have his imported Mexican vanilla. That's what he always called it, because it was 2 L's. And 2 L's in Mexico is a Y. I don't know if it is in vanilla or not, but it was for OJ. Had to have, I remember one year he was worried because he was trying to find the imported Mexican vanilla for his ice cream, and he couldn't. He did before the day happened, like the day before. And then the steaks. You got to have real butter, none of this margarine crap. You got to have real butter on your steaks. I never tried that until I met OJ, and now I don't eat steaks without it. I just don't. Man, so many memories. N0NYY. Proudly net control for the K0OJ Memorial. Holler Happy New Year net. Who's next?
KD0MGB. Yeah, I wasn't there for any of the birthdays or anything like that, but that very well could have been the liquid nitrogen he was using as well to freeze up that ice cream.
You know, it could have been, because he was really good friends with Andy, and Andy was the physics technician for Ross Hall at UNC, and he had a nitrogen producing station, and they used a lot of it. Nitrogen's normally a little bit expensive, but it would work even better, yeah. He probably could have got it through Andy from the university through Andy, I don't know. That's a very good possibility. I never saw the gas version. That would have been cool to see. I shared this at OJ's memorial just the other day, yesterday. And, but I'll share it here because there was a lot of hams at that memorial, but there may be people here that weren't there. 2 things that I encountered with OJ that scared me good. The first one was when he invited me to go to the range with him. You all seen OJ. If you haven't seen OJ in person, you'll need a little explanation. He was born with no lenses in his eyes. He had glasses that were thick as pop bubbles, and he could read just fine. He could do electronics work just fine. He had a macro lens or micro lens that he could swing down, and he had a telescopic lens for driving. Yes, he could drive. And we got out to the range, and I didn't know OJ real well then, but he pulls out this dirty area Model 29 44 mag, and I'm like, where is the safest place for me to stand? He pulled that thing out. I put a target down for him. He loaded up. He looked down the barrel. He looked at the target. He looked at the barrel. He looked at the target. And I could see he was up looking at the target. And he starts pulling the trigger, and he's hitting the target. He's not even looking at the gun because he knows where it's pointed. That was a little scary right at first. But that guy could shoot. Amazing. Very, very good shot. I was thoroughly impressed. The other one was he had his Kawabungi, which was a Kawasaki 250 street bike. And he wanted to go somewhere, and I had to go with him, and I was going in the car, and he was taking his motorcycle. Here again, let me point to the vision problem, but it wasn't going to stop him. He got on that motorcycle, drove all the way across town. I was right behind him. There was no issues. I made sure nobody else was going to get too close behind him because I thought it was the least I could do, but he got all the way across town, he got all the way back home, and he had the biggest grin on his face that I ever saw. He loved riding that motorcycle. I don't know whatever happened to it. You need to find out, but that was a little scary too. I rode a motorcycle a lot, and to see him do it with his vision the way it was rewarding. It was alarming, but it was rewarding. And there on my net control for the 2022 OJ Memorial Holler Happy New Year net. Does anyone else have a memory they'd like to share?
This is K6VPE.
Go ahead, Bill.
He said the reason he gave up his motorcycle is because he didn't trust the drivers on the street.
Go figure. Me either.
When he told me, he said, you know, I can't really look around like I'd like to see what they're all doing. And I don't trust them to know that I'm a motorcycle and you should watch out for me. But he said he didn't want to take any more chances with that.
I'm on about the same page. I've considered selling mine for the same reason. I haven't done it yet. Do you know whatever happened to his bike, Bill?
He sold it and got rid of it.
Seems like the reasonable thing. It was quite a classic. I don't know what year it was, but I know it was pretty old.
Now, the thing he wanted to do, told me he wanted to do, is to be able to drive a car on the salt flats in Utah, and out there drive a race car with something that'd go really fast, and he wouldn't have to worry about hitting anything. You know, he could just point the car and go. I said, well, maybe you could go out there and see if there's some remnants of Greg Breedlove out there shooting his rocket car. No, I mean, shooting his fast car there and get a shot at it.
That would be great. That would be great. I remember, I think it was the first time I went to his house and went upstairs, and I sat down on the bed, and he says, you know, Joe Walsh sat right there where you're sitting. And I said, Joe Walsh, the singer? And he spit out his call sign. I didn't know Joe was a ham, but I thought that was pretty neat. Yep, he was a ham, and he went to OJ's house. That's how well-known OJ was. I don't know how they met, but I knew that he knew Joe.
I guess Joe spent a whole bunch of time with him, too, so it's not like it was a passing thing. I mean, he was generally interested in spending time with him.
Katie's FQN.
FQN, go.
Yeah, it's been so long, so I can't remember it all, but OJ somehow got a hold of Joe Walsh. You know, they're both AM fanatics. And Joe Walsh actually had a house up in the mountains here, and I think OJ may have even been up there. Like I say, it's been way too long for me to remember all this. But that is part of what got those guys tied in together, is because of the AM radio. But I remember him talking about Joe. And one night, unrelated to this, I'm listening to this guy talking about his band and stuff one night. And he was just signing off, and when I heard his call sign, I was just listening, and I was doing something on the computer that night. So I'm just listening, and the next thing I hear was that call sign as he signed off. I was like, you got to be kidding. The one night that I could have talked to Joe Walsh, he's off the air. That's just my memory. But OJ did talk about Joe Walsh before a few times. KD0, FQN.
K0NYY, net control for the 2022 K0OJ Memorial Holler Happy New Year net. I believe Joe and OJ even went shooting together. He talked about him several times, and very fondly. How many other famous people did he know? You gotta wonder. He wasn't the kind of guy that would brag about that. But Joe was apparently a pretty good friend because as Joe, OJ, and I got to be better friends, I heard more and more about him. So I knew it wasn't just a casual one-off thing. I know this was they were pretty good friends for a long time, and the AM thing makes perfect sense. And yep, Joe, OJ spoke very fondly of his AM. He had a transmitter of some kind out in the garage, and I feel like it was helicopters because I thought I had a big silver H on the front, big glass piece on the top, big old honking tubes inside. I thought he told me it was a kilowatt 6-meter transmitter, but I'm not sure. Anyone else have any memories of that or anything else they'd like to share about our dear friend OJ?
K0 Echo Bravo.
Okay, there was a double there. Echo Bravo, go first, please.
Yeah, I'm a member of Wars, and I was kind of making a newsletter for a while. And OJ, I interviewed OJ for the first one I did, and this story did come up. He didn't. The only thing he really talked about was him talking to Joe Walsh, and then Joe wanted some coax, and so him and another guy and OJ went down to Denver to buy some coax because OJ needed some too. That article's on the Wars website. It's under archives and then newsletters, and it's the first one. If anybody wants to read it, I thought I sent it to you, Bart, but maybe not. I'm in the last couple of days, but I might not have. I'm not sure. Anyway, the other thing that impressed me about OJ is he always gave more than he took, and that was definitely true in amateur radio. Over 200 VE sessions. And I think he's like 5 or 6 in the Rocky Mountain division as far as number of sessions that he held. So that was just very impressive. He's always willing to give back to the hobby. K0EB, back to net. Thanks for running it, Bart.
A tremendous pleasure and an even bigger honor. No problem at all. Thank you for the input there. Boy, you're right. You're absolutely right. He gave back and gave back and gave back. Sometimes he dished out some ornery with it, but man, he would never hesitate to answer questions, help people out, walk them along the way. Can't tell you how much stuff I learned about radio from that guy. But an icon in ham radio forever. Anybody else? Oh, yeah, there was a doubling station. Go ahead, please.
K6VPE again.
Go ahead, Bill.
That's true, he did. He told me that. And they had a lot of fun together, he and Joe. And the other thing is he had a pretty good track of who had ham licenses in the entertainment industry. It was amazing. So that person has a ham license. You know, this actor, he says, oh, he's got a ham license. Well, that person has one too, you know. And I go, how do you know that? And he says, I know. But he knew all these people that had these ham licenses that were in the entertainment industry, and I was amazed how he knew all of them. But you know, there was Tim Allen and a couple others that he told me about. I didn't know Tim Allen had one until OJ told me. Then I saw, of course, the one time he got on the radio on one of his Tool Time shows, I think, and got on the ham radio and called CQ or something, I can't remember, but that was cool of him to do. Anyway, K6VPE.
And 7MR.
And 7MR, go ahead.
Tim Allen during Last Man Standing often did scenes with his ham radio stuff in the background. George Wendt was another celebrity ham. He was Norm on Cheers and 7MR.
And EB.
EB, go ahead.
I'm trying to remember back from that article. I think he said he talked to Marlon Brando a long time ago, and I think it was an F5 call in a French call or something like that. But it was on an island in the Pacific, I believe. Might be getting those details mixed up. And then he said he had a schedule with King Hussein, but he missed it by one day because he got the conversion mixed up. So, but you know, we've all done that early in our ham radio careers. Back to net, K0EB.
That reminds me of another story. Boy, I'll tell you what. So I mentioned that my second radio was that 101 EE, and I put a tri-band fan dipole up on the roof, and I was working on 10 meters, or, well, maybe it wasn't. Whatever band it was, I don't remember. But this was very shortly after I got my code. Now, OJ's house and our house were like 5th Street, 10th Street, 21st, 16th, maybe 7 or 8 blocks apart. And anyway, so he could hear me pretty much any time he wanted to. And I'm playing around on the radio, and I get this guy with a call sign, and I write it down, and I look it up real quick, and I get done talking to this guy, and OJ jumps in, and he makes contact with the guy. And then he gets him, and he says, and then my phone rings. He calls me up. OJ calls me up. He didn't say this on the radio. He called me on the phone, and he says, "How did you do that? I have been trying to get Mongolia for 30 darn years. How do you get that in your first month?" He was mad. But he was happy for me because I got it, but he was mad because he'd been trying to get Mongolia forever, and I got it 10 seconds before he did. But he was good-natured about it, but that was just a cool thing. I guess there's all of, like, at that point in time, a couple dozen hams in Mongolia, not very many of them back in the 90s. But I'll never forget that. That was so cool. That made me feel really good about my little old beat-up old radio and my little fan dipole. And the thing was only like 30 feet up in the air, but it worked good. And that fan dipole was OJ's suggestion, too. This is M0NYY with the 2022 OJ commemorative Holler Happy New Year net. Anybody else?
LG.
Go ahead, Kokwak.
Kokwak. Gooch. Kokwak. You know, OJ had some pretty nice equipment, but he didn't brag about it. He really didn't care what you ran for equipment as long as he could hear you. And if there was a problem with it, he'd let you know about it because he wasn't picking on you. He just wanted you to have a solid signal with good audio and no white noise. And now we're talking repeaters talk now, not HF. But he really didn't care what you had. If you had a Baofeng, Yaesu, Kingwood, ICOM, he wasn't brand loyal. He just didn't care. As long as you had a good signal and good audio, and if you didn't, he'd let you know about it. Yeah, sometimes he was a little bit rough, but anybody that ever got told your signal sucks, your audio's not good, they went and changed it, and they fixed it, and then we all could listen to that station with a good signal and good audio. So yeah, he was just never judgmental. Always helpful, although thin-skinned people didn't appreciate it. Those that wanted to have a good signal with bodacious audio did. So I guess my main point is he didn't judge. He didn't care what you had as long as you had a good signal, and he made sure, you know, if you didn't know how to make the signal good, he would help you figure it out, so we all could benefit from it. K0 MLG Kokwak.
Thank you, Marty. I agree 100%. He had that old Cushman's Cushcraft. The antenna people had a Cushcraft service monitor, thanks to Army Mars. And if your modulation wasn't right on your radio, you could drag your radio over to OJ's house. Now, you better be prepared to sit down and talk, because you could get over there and go up the stairs and sit down at the bench, and he would turn the thing on. And you're sitting there waiting to get going on it. And he said it takes 40 minutes for the ovens to heat up. It doesn't count before 40 minutes. So you got to sit there and talk to OJ for 40 minutes. I think that was a strategy that he used. But, yep, he would do whatever it took to get you working. Didn't care what you had. I agree 100%. Ham radio is about communicating. OJ was about communicating. If you could communicate good, good. If you couldn't communicate good, he would tell you and he would help you. Just, and I feel like an awful lot of hams in our ham community are like that. I feel like hams around the country, everywhere, are like that, for the most part. So, how many people on the air tonight ever took OJ for a ride in their car? And every time you pulled up to a stop sign or hit the brakes for whatever reason, he would do that little whistle. It's like, what is wrong with that? It's OJ. There was a double there. ESV. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I took OJ many times out to the ham shack about 5 miles east of Eden, and yeah, he'd do that whistle every time. And the other one is that inch and a half diameter coax. Don't know which antenna it goes to on his tower, but he was proud of the fact that Joe Walsh gave him that coax.
Probably on that trip they took to HRO together. Yep. Thank you for that, Brian. Doubling station, go ahead. Was that Bill?
Yeah, it was me. Just so you know, it was a Cushman, not a Cushcraft. And if he left it plugged in, actually, he was kind of full of it. Because there's a light on the front of the Cushcraft that if it's on, it's a little light that turns on. It says the oven's at temperature. If you leave it plugged in, the oven's always on, so you don't have to wait. Anyway, I always left it plugged in. I never had to wait for the oven.
Or does it have to, or do you know?
You got covered there. Say again.
Is that service monitor still there, or did that go back to Army Mars, or am I mistaken that it belonged to Army Mars, or do you know?
It belonged to him. Everything eventually ended up as his from Army Mars. You know, if you have it a certain length of time, you get it, I guess, and it ended up being his. It's fine, except somebody managed to knock one of the attenuator slots cuckoo, the resistor attenuators, and you need to use an external attenuator, like a K attenuator, to help you with calibrate the thing so that's right on. But it still works good, and I went through it one time and zeroed in all of the scales, and it seems to have held well after I did that. And anyway, but it's good. And just, if you get it and want to use it, just plug it in and leave it plugged in. Don't unplug it, and it'll always be ready to go.
I remember the little orange light because he showed me when that came on. So I think that day I went over, it wasn't even plugged in because I remember waiting, and the light finally came on, and they said, now we're ready to get to work. I did the work, but he had the thing set up to read the deviation, and it was pretty low, and we got it where it should be. If I doubled with somebody a minute ago, go ahead, please.
Yeah, EXP, I think it was Cushman C3.
Yep, and he knew that thing inside out, upside down, and backwards. He was pretty good with it. What a handy piece of equipment. This is 0NYY, Bart, control for the 2022 K0OJ Memorial Holler Happy New Year Net. I can think of no better way to start 2023 than with deep, rich memories of our friend OJ. Who's next?
MLG.
Go ahead, Marty.
All right, so I'm not a Morse code guy. So I'm going to whistle something for you Morse code people. Because OJ would whistle people's call signs to call for them. And if you knew Morse code, you knew you were getting called. If you didn't, it was just like, all right, there's OJ whistling again. Have no idea what he's saying because I don't know CW. I don't know how I remember this, but it went like this. I'll repeat it. Maybe that's his call sign. Like I said, I don't know CW. CW. Whoever knows CW, I guess it's going to be go through net control and tell me what that meant.
N7MR.
I know it's a pro sign, not regular letters. N7MR, go ahead.
That's what I was going to say. It's either pro sign or, maybe, Marty, you're just not getting it right. It could be, if I was to decode it and not understand it, it would be XT. But, yeah, more likely it's a pro sign, and I would have to look that up.
Okay, I can just sit here. I can hear OJ doing it now, and maybe I'm not getting it right, Mike. You might be right. I don't know. I just know that he whistled code quite regularly, and it never bothered me. I don't know. I don't understand CW. Maybe one of these days, but. Yeah, it was just another one of his little quirks that he would get on the repeater and whistle code. And like I said, those that knew code knew what he meant. Those that didn't went, I wonder what he was saying. K0MLG.
It was da, which is a sign.
X-ray November, N7MR.
N7MR, I doubled with you, go again.
K6VP, he used to whistle his own call sign a lot. And if he wanted me, he'd call me by CW, sometimes on the radio so nobody would know, so I would respond.
Yep. N7MR, I doubled with you, go again.
No, my fault. I keyed up too early. While Marty was talking, I was playing the CW that he did, whistled back in my head. It was XN, X-ray November, twice. X-ray November, if that's the way you wanted to code it, N7MR.
Roger. Well, if the last character was a dit instead of a da, that would be a slant. But, anyway, yep, he's always whistling code. He's always mad at me for never getting good at my, oh my, another story. Who started this? I got my no-code tech when they came out with the no-code tech. It was official in January. I got mine in February of 91. And later in 91 or in early 92, I took my code test. And boy, he was disgusted with me, and I was trying to figure out why. And then he sat down and explained. He says, for 5 words a minute code, the average word in Morse code, or the average word as far as the ham, rule, and rigs goes, was 5 characters. So you had to have 25 characters. You either had to answer the questions and get a percentage. You had to have a certain number of characters of solid copy, or there was three criteria. But anyway, one of them was you had to have 1 minute of solid copy, which would be 25 characters, which is 5 words. And I had a mistake. I had exactly 25 characters, and I had another mistake. And that was the closest I got on anything. My questions were nowhere near right. And I was writing either the dots and dashes or writing the letters. And if I wrote the dots and dashes, I went back through and I wrote the letters above them or under them or whatever. But he was pretty disgusted with me, but he had to pass me. And he says, you missed. You got just 25, and you missed. He said, you don't know your code well enough. But legally, I have to pass you. And I could have swore he wanted to say damn it on the end, but OJ did not use any foul language ever. Crap was the worst word he ever said. But he had to pass me on my code, and I got it, and I was a little proud of that. I couldn't pass it today. I haven't used it since. Shame on me. But because of my friend OJ, I think I'm going to get to work on it. And 0NYY. Anybody else?
MIC.
MIC, good to hear you this morning, Mark. Go right ahead.
W2MIC. Once upon a time, when I was a newly minted advanced, I had an ICOM 706, and I enlisted OJ's help to find a real HF radio with a better receiver. This was during Mike's administration down at the what is today the Loveland Dog Park. And so O.J. asked me what was my budget. I told him. He wandered off and stopped at every table in the Hamfest. He knew every single person with a table. And he came back and took me by the arm and took me over to a table and said, "Pay the man." And I said, "Okay, how much?" Well, the price turned out to be just exactly my budget. And I bought an ICOM 765 contesting radio. Later learned that I had paid about one-third the going price. And I asked O.J. what the story was, and I knew the guy. And it turned out that that morning, his wife, since he had just bought the latest and greatest contest radio, his wife had pointed him to the car and said, "Take the radio, and only one of you comes back." Well, I used that radio for many years, talked all over the world. It is still in operation on loan to another ham, and that's my favorite O.J. story.
Well, they say it ain't what you know, it's who you know, but as far as what he knew about ham radio, that was pretty hard to surpass. And apparently he was pretty good at who he knew, too. Thank you for sharing that, Mark. I appreciate it. Yep. Always trying to push you forward, push the hobby forward, pull people forward, pull new people in. I don't know anybody as dedicated to ham radio as him. Okay, so Mike MH is pretty close to that too, because he's quite the proponent of ham radio, and it's just wonderful that we have people like this in this hobby. And it's one of the things I love about this hobby. Anybody who do anything for anybody. N0NYY net control for the K0OJ commemorative Happy Holler New Year net. Boy, my tongue's getting tired. Who else has a story to share?
This is K6VPE, and I'm in the clear.
K6VPE N0NYY. Bill, it has been tremendously wonderful to have you here this evening, and I hope that you feel that this net was a fitting tribute to our friend O.J. So, thank you for staying up. I know it's probably kind of rough, but I really appreciate you hanging in there with us. K6VPE 73 N0NYY.
That was good. It was very, very good. Talk to you tomorrow. We'll talk more about it then. Anyway, K6VPE is clear until tomorrow at about 10 in the morning.
That'll be today, Bill. Have a good sleep. K0MLG.
Yeah, I don't know. If I assume I might be sick tomorrow morning myself. But you have a good point, Marty. All right. Would anybody else care to share a story about O.J. and ham radio, or O.J. and themselves, or O.J. and anything else?
EXV.
Go ahead, Brian.
Well, besides non-ham, and he was so devoted to his church that even with his eyesight would do the bulletins, type them up and take them to the church, and then in the late 1990s and early 2000s, he sang in the Greeley Chorale and had a pretty decent voice, even though you'd have to be about 3 inches away from the sheet music.
Roger. I actually, what do you call it? I went to the Greeley Chorale and I did a thing, auditioned, that's what it was. And I could have joined, but something else came up and happened, and it just didn't go well. But I know O.J. had to read the sheet music about the first 2 or 3 times through, and then he didn't bother with it anymore because his memory had trapped it all. And it was more work for him to read than it was to remember, because that guy could remember like a computer, I swear. Unbelievable memory. Thank you for that. I do want to point out to everyone that this whole net has been recorded in multiple ways at multiple places. So it's going to get eventually, I don't know how long it'll take, but it will get posted to the anyone wishes to have it personally and emailed, you're welcome to email me. I don't expect there's too many people on here that don't have my email, but if you don't, I'm good on QRZ. You don't even have to sign in. Just search my call generically and my email will show up right there. Anyone else care to share any stories about OJ? Please call Net Control now.
Well, if anybody's interested, I happen to have the 2019 Holler Happy New Year on a WAV file. I'd be happy to play it if you want to hear it.
I would rather have you send it to me if you can, if it's not too big. Otherwise, we'll get it on a memory stick or something. The audio, as it goes through the radio and through the repeater and back through the other radio, I'd rather hear it playing it on the computer where I can equalize it a little bit if I need to. For me, anyway, that would be better. But you know my hearing is atrocious anyway.
Yeah, it's in an old email on the. It's in Outlook Express on an old laptop. Rise Broadband doesn't support it anymore. I don't know. Like, I can't send it to myself anymore. So I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to be able to pull this off the computer. I'm sure somebody will know how, but I do not. But I did have 2019. There may be even more. I got to go back, but I just went to 2020 because that's the last time OJ did it. Yeah, 21 he didn't do it. So, anywho, that's. I hope everybody got a chance to listen to the 2020 recording tonight. I know the audio kind of sucked, but it was the best I could do with the equipment that I have.
Well, it's the sentiment that counts, not the audio quality, so thank you for doing that. I'm getting up early for church tomorrow, so I'm having thoughts, it's now 1 o'clock, in the back of my head that at some point the sharing will slow down and I'll close the net. That doesn't mean nobody else can share stuff. Of course, the repeater will be open for that. Before I do that, does anyone else have any memories to share? Please call Net Control now. Alrighty. Well, since they're on my way for the beep, I will close the official portion of the net, and I would encourage anyone who wishes to do so to continue sharing. Thank you all for participating in probably the most meaningful thing in my heart that I ever did on ham radio. I greatly appreciate everyone's participation. OJ will be greatly missed, but his spirit of contribution, support, and willingness to help will live on in all of us, I am sure. So, with that, I will officially close the 2022 K0OJ commemorative Holler Happy New Year net. Thank you all very much, and 0 and 1 way.